Hello, everybody. It's been a minute. I had no. I woke up this morning, just like thinking, and I decided that you know what? Screw it. I'm finally going to do one of those videos that I asked my community what they wanted me to do, and yeah, no, I'm finally doing that. I'd like to explain why, even though I'm certain you don't really care. Um, I just really woke up this morning. Um, I just couldn't stop thinking about the dream I had last night, right before I woke up. And in this dream, like, you know how dreams are. They're ever moving, ever changing, constantly flitting between this thing and the next, and it's never solid form. And like it felt like at the start it was like a D&D style like thing. Running around, having fun, going on adventures and whatnot, and then it turned into something like Made in Abyss, where I just suddenly like enter this horrific dungeon and I'm stomping on giant roly-polies with snakes inside them, and then I go through a tunnel in that horror like scary dungeon, and then I'm suddenly in a group of people, and in front of me is a guy talking about how he's an actor who works with my brother. I don't have a brother in real life. This is a dream. And how, like, as a sister, I should be looking after him. And, like, how he doesn't really give a shit about him. And then we get to this room, and the guy offers me a ring. But he says, you should take this and use it, because it's not like anyone else would care about you. And it turns out that had a cyanide pill in it. So, like, I immediately grab it from him, and, like, once the doors open to reveal the outside world in a Walmart parking lot, I throw the pill out and just see his dismayed face, and I flip him off and say, fuck you. And, then when I walk outside, I'm me again. I'm me, Liam. I'm no longer any of the other characters and whatnot in the dream. I'm just me. And a friend of mine, they were a friend of mine, pops in and, like, chastises me and was like, hey, I know freedom and speech and all that, but, like, you should really refrain from using language. And I just end up apologizing very cordially and respectfully, but then I think, why am I apologizing? The guy handed me cyanide. And then I just start doing laps around this forest and just talking to people, and I hear people talking about how I should have accepted the cyanide and used it. And it was really weird. And the dream ends off with me running with a friend who ends up trapped under a log. And I just wake up. And it's weird. It was a weird dream. I don't know how to explain it. It kept going from one thing to the next, and I was all these different characters, all these different people in the dream. And that's just kind of how dreams work. And when I woke up, I couldn't think of that one person, that one former friend that chastised me for language, because that was the only person in the dream that I know is a real person in the real world. And I'm not sure they care. I'm sure they hate my guts probably in the real world. But now I'm just left. It just started to get me thinking about things. And then I just started thinking more. And now here I am, awake, had a cup of coffee, which I never drink coffee, so yeah. And I decided to pop on and check community suggestion, like what my community suggested I make a video on, because I felt like making a video on something, and I chose this one. So, anyways, down to the subject at hand. We're here for a diatribe on the shadow self in Jungian psychology. Now, I will stress that I will be going into my own personal experiences, but I really will only be using that as a means to further a point. I'll use myself as an example of how I've failed and how I've succeeded in incorporating Jungian psychology, and this is not as a form of vindication or justification for anything on my end. It's more just to show that this is what I mean, and I'm trying to show like the successes and failures of it through experience. And yeah, but yeah, Jungian psychology, fun stuff. I do a lot of personal research into philosophy and psychology just for fun. And Jungian psychology is easily one of the more refined ones that I can say has contributed the most to my personal views. Of course, I ended up there are times when I was just like in a depressed mood and I thought up of a concept only to learn that it was already kind of done in the Jungian by Carl Jung, but like I just had a different flavor to it when I thought it up. But yeah. So I want to focus in on the shadow self specifically on this, because if I go into depth on the whole Jungian psychology as a whole, we'd be here for hours, and I don't want to use up too much of your time, because believe it or not, if you forget about the intro to this video, I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to take up too much of it. Most of you are busy with something or other. So, yeah, I want to just be here and educate. And I am watching my cat as she's about to knock something off. Hermione? No. Okay, she's fine now. Anyways. Can you tell the sugar is and the caffeine is affecting me? But yeah. Anyways, so the shadow self. We all have it. Let's make that clear. Every single person has a shadow self. It's just a part of who we are. It's like the whole two wolves inside me thing kind of evolved from this concept. Except this concept is significantly less edgier, and whoever invented the two wolves inside me thing was depressed and probably emo. No offense to whoever they are. But yeah, in Jungian psychology, the shadow self is the part of ourselves that exists within our subconscious. And the mind is separated into two parts. You have the conscious mind, our active thoughts, like all the active decisions we make, and whenever we feel hungry and we want to go out and like we're craving a certain food, and we decide to go and get that said food, that's our conscious in action. We're making active decisions and taking action. And then there's your subconscious, which is filled with all the stuff that like makes you you that you don't think about. All the things about you that you just don't really ever bother to focus on. And a lot of stuff can end up in the subconscious and to that extent into the shadow self. Thing about the shadow self is it's full of all the things about yourself that you repress. So whenever you have something about you, say you don't like this thing about yourself. You look in the mirror and you're not as pretty as you want to be. You don't like the sound of your voice. You think you're a little too arrogant. And stuff like that. So you take those things and you shove them down. You ignore them and you don't really think about them. So they go into your subconscious. But because they're things that you don't like, things that you find undesirable, and or things that you hate about yourself, they go straight into the shadow self. And think of the shadow self as an alter ego of sorts. It's basically you, but made up of all the stuff you don't like about yourself. Like, say you don't like this one specific aspect of your personality. Say you're a little too prideful and you think yourself to be braggadocious. So you decide to ignore that part of yourself. Press it down and shove it away into the backlogs of your mind and ignore it until the end of time. It's still there. It's still part of you. It's not going away. And you can't get rid of it. So, what do? You shove it down. You ignore it. Because, of course, that's the best way. Like, don't fuel the fire and they'll go out, right? It doesn't go out. Okay? Now what? It's still part of you. It's still burning. Sure, it's a few sparks right now, but who knows? It might become a huge bonfire later. And here's the thing about the shadow self. If you keep repressing it, what you think is a tiny little spark will eventually like build up more and more as it's fueled by your own hatred of it. The more you don't want it, the brighter it will burn, and the darker the shadow will be. And thus, eventually it'll get to a point where you'll be in a situation where you're at your limit, you're not doing well mentally, you feel like exploding. And that's when the shadow self really comes out. Because after all that time festering in the backlogs of your mind, all that time with more fuel being added to it, finally it cannot be contained by your subconscious anymore, and it bursts out. It explodes. And this is what people usually refer to when the worst situations bring out who people truly are, or letting someone's true colors shine. Because these are the ugly parts that we don't like about ourselves, that we push down. They're suddenly being burst open. And it is quite literally the worst part of us most of the time. Of course, not all the time. There are exceptions, but those exceptions are exceedingly rare. And yeah, no, it ain't good. And there will always be moments where, like, if you let your guard down and you just stop thinking about it, and then when you get into that stressful situation and you hit your limit and you can no longer, like, since you're not focusing on it, since you're not thinking about it, since it's no longer occupying your thought process of things to not let out of your head, you suddenly let it out. And shit hits the fan, pretty much. And here's the thing. The shadow self is a part of you. It's basically your other half. You got the kind, or whatever exterior you put on. In Jungian psychology, everybody has this metaphorical mask, a way they act in front of other people, to cover up all the parts they don't like about themselves, so then they appear more sociable, more put together, and more approachable, making it so that, how do I put this? So that us humans as social creatures can actually socialize. It's something everyone does. And part of it is, like, when we put on that metaphorical mask and go out and talk to people and interact with them, we kind of stop thinking about our subconscious. We don't focus on it. We don't think about it. It's kind of the whole point of its existence. And yeah, and a lot of people, like, you'll see celebrities, for example, or politicians, or anyone who is at a forefront, is in the public eye, or is regularly interacting with people, will always have that metaphorical mask on. They'll always be thinking about how to act around our people, and how to present themselves. And they're not thinking about anything in their subconscious. So, what happens when all those things, when you're constantly putting on this act and being sociable, being around people, and constantly wearing this metaphorical mask? You're constantly hiding away all the stuff you don't like about yourself from not only those people, but also yourself. And it gets to a point where you believe your own lies, where you deceive yourself, thinking, and, like, you constantly put on this kind act for other people, and then you end up lying to yourself, and you start believing, I'm a kind person. And over time, it's not a situation of fake it till you make it. You're still that same person that you've always been, but now you're just shoving down those parts that you don't like without even realizing it. So those parts of yourself, those selfish parts, the parts that make you greedy, that make you lustful, that make you prideful, you shove it down. And, like, any of the 7 deadly sins, really, the more you shove it down, the more you repress it, the more starved it becomes. It's like a bad dog. Think of the shadow self like a bad dog. And that dog always tries, like, the less attention you give it, the more it acts out. And the less you feed it, the more it starves, and the more it's willing to bite the hand that would usually feed it. And anytime you try and take it out on walks, it tries to pull you in this direction and that, trying to force you to do all these things that you don't want to do. That you keep telling yourself, this is not something I would do, this is not me. Yeah, but it is ultimately still part of you. You still crave these things. You still want them. You're hungry for them. So if you don't satisfy them to any degree, then eventually it'll be repressed and it'll compound in on itself. It'll become twisted and ugly and it'll fester until you reach the point where it explodes. Take priests, for example. We all know the joke. Father Cunningham bediddling kids. Everyone's heard it. Everybody knows it. It's a dark joke. It's considered rather unsavory. But we all know it, and in many situations, it's true. And there have been plenty of people that have their horror stories of having been on the receiving end of it. Now think about a priest's position. They have sworn off all mortal wants and anything that could be considered temptation. So, imagine that you are constantly refusing to let yourself enjoy X, Y, and Z. Okay, at first it seems fine. I could go without it. It's nothing much, and I shouldn't have it anyway. So why should I even think about indulging in it? Time goes by. That thing seems nice, but no, I shan't be tempted. And yeah, no, I'm fine. I'm still fine without it. I'm totally not. I totally don't need it. I don't need it. And then eventually, however long it takes, for most, it's years. It's just I need it. This thing that I sworn off, I know it's bad. I want it though. I really want it. That is the shadow self at play. That's actually the finest example of it at play. These people are in positions where they are denying themselves X, Y, and Z. And therefore, because of that, they're not fulfilling the needs that their mental and emotional and even sometimes physical needs that they require from X, Y, and Z. Therefore, they start craving X, Y, and Z. And once it gets to a point where they're willing to do unforgivable acts to satisfy their wants for X, Y, and Z, it's already too late. They already stuck themselves in this position, or they were forced into this position by some outside force or some obligation. Who knows? Everyone's situation is a little different. But in the end, they're in this position for some reason or another. They're denying themselves the things that they want and or need, and because of that, that craving is built up from all the time that it's spent being repressed, and they're at the point where it's exploding. That is the shadow self at work. We all have it. And part of what Carl Jung describes as individuation, the process of becoming whole by integrating your subconscious and your shadow self into your conscious, focuses on looking at your shadow self, accepting it, and integrating those undesirable parts of who you are into yourself. No, Hermione. And allowing yourself to have X, Y, and Z, to satiate the craving. So then now you go from like scratching your neck in a back alleyway to try and get it to, all right, I've had enough for the week. I can go. I can like, I don't need it for another month or so, and then just like a month passes, you get it again, and there you go. You're done with it. And that's why a lot of couples in committed relationships that haven't, for lack of a better way of saying it, done it in a while, will end up cheating on each other. Because their like emotional and or physical needs are not being met in their current relationship, and thus they seek it elsewhere. It's an instinctual thing. We can't get rid of it. It's hard baked into our systems. And eventually bottled up, twisted, explodes. Simple concept. And like part of individuation is like uncapping that bottle like in slight degrees until like you've drained it. You have cleared the backlog of repressed emotions and desires and things about yourself that you don't like. And by like, say you're like one of the things you push down is your pride. You really like, you like take it. So basically, if you repress your pride, if that's the thing you repress, and you uncap it little by little, let it, like, giving yourself a little more credit than you usually would, and eventually you'll get to a point where you've like uncapped it little by little, given yourself these situations where like you acknowledge yourself and you meet the needs of your pride, and you eventually like and like you get to a point where you're well balanced. You're no longer how do I put this? You no longer take away credit for yourself, but you also mitigate the risk of that explosion. So now if, say, the explosion were to happen, you've let out your pride enough to small degrees that if you were to explode, it would be a small poof. You wouldn't be yelling at the top of your lungs. You'd actually more likely be able to remain calm and collected in that in a situation that where you would explode, versus someone who keeps their pride built up inwards. They would explode massively. It would be like a nuclear bombshell, depending on how much they've repressed it. And yeah, it wouldn't be nice. And these are all aspects we have to some degree. We all have pride. We all have envy. We all have greed, lust, sloth. Where are the other 7 deadly sins? Hold on, I got it somewhere. I can't. My brain ain't working right. Gluttony, wrath. Yeah, wrath especially. Wrath is really one of the big perpetrators. Wrath and pride. Wrath, pride, and lust are like the 3 biggest perpetrators that you see on the news. Like, everybody has anger. Everybody feels angry. Everybody wants to let out their anger and lash out and feel some sort of vindication and get satisfaction from it. And because of that, like, horrible, deplorable acts of violence end up being committed. Like, say, shootings and whatnot, or murder, or even war crimes. Everybody has wrath, and the more you repress it, the more it builds up until it eventually explodes, and then you see all these horrific acts on the news because someone didn't have a healthy outlet to let out their anger or hatred of something. And now many people have suffered for it. Same goes for everything else. If you don't have a healthy outlet for letting out your greed, eventually you'll be chasing after the next big thing, the next thing to make you big money, until it drives you into the ground and drives away all the people around you, because you crave this greed, you crave this thing that you don't have, that you know you can get. Similar situation with envy. If you're constantly repressing, like everybody has those thoughts of like, that person has that thing, I like that thing, I wish I had that thing, I want that thing, I will get that thing. And eventually it builds up, and the more someone pushes down that envy, the more likely they are to steal. And it may start out simple, like, petty thievery, just steal a granola bar from a convenience store, for example. And then, like, you do it often enough, you're letting out those repressed emotions, and there's a rush to it. It's like drugs. I wouldn't know, I've never had drugs, but that's how I've seen it compared by many others. It's like drugs, and like you get this rush from it, from like letting out these cravings and emotions and feeling better. It makes you feel good letting it out. And that all comes from the fact that that person did not have an healthy outlet to satisfy this thing. Like the paradox of people with abandonment issues. How they're so used to being abandoned and left behind that they push people away, and even at some points they themselves abandon others and leave them in the dirt. And it is a paradox, but it's understandable, because this person feels vindicated in their actions because previously they were unable to, how do I put this? They were hurt in this way, which caused them to repress certain emotions. So now they're the ones doing the hurting, even if they don't realize it. Hell, most of the time they don't realize it. Most people aren't aware or don't even think of the pain they caused. They relegate it, like that type of thing, to their subconscious. Doesn't occur to them. How could stealing $1 from the Salvation Army hurt anyone? Huh? I could use that dollar to get myself a pack of gum. Well, not with the inflation nowadays, but a pack of gum that will keep me happy for the next few days as I chew it. And we humans are selfish creatures at heart. So we don't think of others when these acts play out in our minds, when we run through the scenarios in our heads, and then when we finally get to the point where we commit these acts. We don't think of the other person. We don't think of their suffering, of the pain it causes. It's just not our nature because it's relegated to our subconscious. Our mind has, our shadow self has deemed it unnecessary to think of when it explodes. Therefore, when it explodes, all that like empathy that we would otherwise feel, gone, just like that. Nothing we can do about it. At least while it's happening. We don't think of it. We don't hold ourselves back. Can't. It's like, think of it like you got one person, one singular person standing there. That is your empathy. That is your inhibitions. That is that is the little voice telling you, I shouldn't do this. I cannot do this. This would be wrong to do this. And then take that little person, set them right there, and then here you have is a giant tidal wave of repressed emotion coming in and crashing down. All you can hear is the sweeping roar of the wave. And damn, does it feel good to ride it. So, I hope that puts it into perspective that the more you deny yourself the things in life, the more you'll want it. And the more you'll want it, the more you'll end up needing it. And at some point, it'll push you to a point where you can't go back from. Everybody experiences this. Most people aren't aware of this. Most people end up finding some form of equilibrium without realizing it. They'll wake up, eat, sleep, and die. And they won't even think about it because they'll have achieved that little equilibrium. And now, with the world constantly going in and out of being in a horrific, chaotic state, and everybody is afraid of the next World War III on the horizon, even though, we're always close to it. But we've yet to take that step that final step that would cause World War III in all these situations and scenarios. And, we're always on the precipice of the apocalypse, basically. But a few sensible people exist. A few people that have that nice little equilibrium of satisfying their desires without giving in to them. And they manage to keep the world from going to shit. And that's why it's so hard to find good, sensible people nowadays, because most people don't think about these things. They don't bother to. It's not something that goes through their minds. They don't know about it, thus they don't think about it. It's thanks to the people who have thought about it, that we know about it, and that we're able to ponder it and question it, pick it apart, pick ourselves apart, ponder ourselves, think about ourselves, and take inventory of ourselves, and work on ourselves, and improve ourselves. And, is only through taking inventory of ourselves that we can really know what makes ourselves tick and how we can satisfy those desires without giving in to them. So few people know how to do that. It's a crying shame. It is. It's my hope that in making this video, that you guys will be just a little more educated, even though, honestly, I could have explained a lot more things better in this video. I could have really hammered in a few points better and just kept it nice and clean, but as I've said before, I don't do scripts. In the end, we are responsible for ourselves, and if we don't take care of ourselves properly, then we will end up succumbing to our shadow selves. To what degree depends on the person, depends how much that desire is repressed, depends on how much they're suffering, whether or not it's genuine or it's fabricated. It's still suffering nonetheless, and still needs to be addressed. Because if it isn't, it'll get bottled up, it'll fester, and it'll explode. And, well, everybody needs some form of therapy. Everybody's a little crazy. But it's up to us to stand tall, take responsibility for our actions, acknowledge that this is who and what we are, this is how we function. We cannot change our base functions, but we can change our day-to-day functions. We can change how we think, we can change how we feel, depending on what it is. There are certain things you can't change about yourself. I've learned that the hard way. And it's really a matter of making sure the needs are satisfied without sabotaging yourself, without giving in to the desires you're repressing, because there is a reason you're repressing it. What reason that may be, I don't know. But ultimately, whatever it is, you gotta keep in moderation. Because you can't give into it. If you give into it, that's the same as letting it explode, but in a different flavor, in a different manner. So instead, you gotta let it out little by little, keep it in moderation, satisfy it, keep the bad dog fed so it won't bite your hand. And eventually you'll reach a point where it's nice and balanced and equal. And once it is, sure, the scales will tip a little here and there, depending on the situation. Even the calmest man can't help but get angry in certain situations. Even the wisest person acts rashly, depending on the circumstances. And even the kindest person will commit acts of hatred if they're pushed far enough. And it's true for everybody. We're all humans. We've all experienced these horrible things in our lives. Some worse than others, some better than others. But in the end, it is up to us to decide how we carry ourselves, what we decide to do, and how we handle our pain. we have to acknowledge that it's there, address it, and deal with it. Let it out in a healthy manner, and put ourselves into a situation where we can control it. It's difficult. Bloody hell, it's difficult. But in the end, if we can get ourselves to that point, if we can find that controlled, safe environment, a little haven for ourselves, that we can let out a little bit of our shadow without letting it overtake us, then we'll be able to survive. We'll be able to live, even. And we need that. We need to not only, once we meet the things, like the requirements to survive, then we can really start meeting the requirements for us to live. And there is a difference between the two. And some people are put into circumstances where it's incredibly difficult. It's a truly Herculean task, one that seems impossible to accomplish. And others are put into a position where it's just so incredibly easy, but because they don't think about it, they don't bother. Like celebrities that have had a troubled past, but now they have so much wealth, and they're in a high, and they've secured a position in high society. They don't bother to think about these repressed things because they've made it this far. Why would they have to? But if they do address it, they'll very rarely ever be caught in anything like a scandal or any form of controversy with it being genuine. Other than some troll on the internet deciding, I want to ruin this person's life, posting false information about that person. Other than that, that person will never experience, it will likely, rarely ever experience any form of stress or controversy that would ruin their lives. And yeah, most people aren't in those positions, though. Most people are in positions where it is difficult, but it's not impossible. We are capable of it, but it is something that is difficult to do. And humans, our brains, are hardwired to go for the easiest option. But as we all know, the easiest option is not always the best option. Sometimes we have to take that harder path, that harder route. Sometimes we have to stick our hands in the thorns to part them, so then we can make it out onto the other side better than we were. It hurts. It's painful. It's difficult. But if any of us hope to become better as people, to be able to stand tall as people, and be able to become whole, become complete as people, then we have to take that harder route. We have to take that harder path, that painful path. Nobody wants to do it. But in the end, it's what we have to do, so that we might be able to live good lives, happy lives, fulfilling and complete lives. And those who are able to die without regrets either lived a life of delusion or lived a life of fulfillment. And personally, I would much prefer the fulfillment route. I suppose that's all from me. I could have, in all honesty, done a lot of this much better if only I had a script, if only I had some pre-planning, and if only I did X, Y, and Z. But I didn't. Like many other people, I am a creature of whims. Those whims often come back to bite me. But in the end, I'm not in a position where I can control it. All in all, I just wish to help educate people and help other people think. I want people to think. I want people to take inventory and to consider who they are, what they're doing with their lives, and I want them to be able to think of how they can improve it. May not be much. I may not be helping anyone because nobody may end up seeing this. But in the end, I want people to be able to stand tall, to be able to move on from their haunted pasts, and to be able to look towards the future, and to be able to take pride in the fact that they're able to not only get as far as they have, but in the fact that they, as human beings, can even do that. Do you think most animals think about these types of things? How they can improve as individuals beyond hunting capability? Not really. No. No. That's one of the many things that separates us from animals. And you know what? We might as well embrace it. While we have the ability to better ourselves as people, and thus we absolutely fucking should. But yeah, that's all from me. Sorry if a few of the points I made felt contrived or badly explained. I tried my best. And I hope that everybody listening in from home has learned at least a little something from this long, drawn-out, contrived explanation. Now, if you'll excuse me, I will go back to replaying one of my favorite games of all time, Ghost of Tsushima, working on getting a job and earning some actual goddamn money, and getting ready for my next step in my journey in life. But yeah, that'll be all for me. Like, subscribe, turn on notifications if you want to. I don't really care. And I'll see you next time. Arrivederci.